Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Anders and Sam have set us all up. The kitchen has brought the refreshments. Our video guy is in his position. Welcome to Saturday Matters. Before we start, a public service announcement. This is another National Day of Action. So I'm protesting ICE detentions. After this program is over, you can run out and grab a sign in the lobby and proceed up to the very well-traveled corner of 45th and Stoneway, wave the signs and see how many people honk at us. It'll probably be a lot. Okay, Bob and Andrea recently arrived here. Bob has been, he had a career in the Navy, and this is another chance where we're fortunate to have someone with a lot of first-hand knowledge give us a perspective on the things that are happening every day in our headline news. We're going to talk about what's going on in the Straight of Hormuz. Okay, Bob, it's all yours.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here and for being interested in a topic which is going to be in the news a lot in the weeks to come. What you have on the screen is a photograph from the newspaper, from the internet, and it's probably as good an illustration as I could probably find about the fact that this is a blockade, and it's different, and it's more different than most blockades are. And we'll get to that very shortly. You probably know that blockades have been used for centuries between maritime powers that are at war with each other. The Greeks and the Romans, the Greeks and the Persians, I should say, went through the blockade process, and it's happened many times since. You're probably aware of the blockades that the U.S. imposed on Vietnam during that war. You're probably aware of blockades that the North imposed on the South during the Civil War. And of course, during World War I and II, we blockaded Germany very solidly. So here we have a blockade which, like all blockades, is different from every other blockade. And so let me ask you some questions. This is a photograph from the internet. So this is the USS Bruins. That's a U.S. Navy destroyer. And this is a merchant ship. In this case, I gotta look her name up. Never forget it. Tuska. She's a merchant ship belonging to the Iranian National Shipping Agency. We think that the blockade is directed at ships carrying oil from from Iranian ports. Is this an oil tanker? No, it's not an oil tanker. What is it? It's a container ship. And just to show you how different this blockade has turned out to be, this is the first ship intercepted by the United States since the blockade was created. This incident, this intercept took place 340 miles away from the Persian Gulf. How did this merchant ship, Tuska, get 340 miles away from the Persian Gulf and force the USS to chase him down, to race after? 6 hours it took from the time they assigned this task to the ship until they finally caught up with it. What was happening during those 6 hours? I really don't have any idea, but my guess is that somebody in the Navy in the Persian Gulf went back to the headquarters and said, hey, this guy has come out of the Persian Gulf. He's not carrying oil. You need us to track him down. And somebody that churned around in the Pentagon for hours while they decided what to do. And the reason is that Tuska is carrying a variety of materials valuable for a missile system, a missile launch system, and for developing a nuclear weapon. So eventually, the Pentagon decided that maybe they really didn't want Tuska to get where she was headed, and it decided to intercept her. In the old days, the target ship would be, a prize crew would be put on board, maybe 4 people or so, there's not very many, and she would be sailed to an independent port, but a port which recognized international law. On arrival at that port, she'd be turned over to the courts of that country, and a hearing held on why the ship was seized, and the value of the cargo would be distributed to the crew of the ship. It's about the best thing that can happen to a Navy crew. Of course, never happened in the United States. We didn't do business that way, but the UK did, and they made it a device for recruiting more sailors. So theoretically, the ship has to be taken, Tuska has to be taken to a neutral port, the ship and the cargo turned over to the courts of that port, and then the court decides whether Tuska was really avoiding the blockade and whether she's liable to being seized. And of course, courts that you wouldn't take the Tuska to a court that did not recognize international law and would not condemn her, because that's what you want. You want control of that cargo. So in this case, Tuska has been apprehended, and the United States has to stop her. The Navy has to stop her. How are you going to stop a merchant ship from proceeding the way it wants to? Especially when you're all alone, you just got one destroyer here, and how is he going to get that fellow to stop? The way he chose in this particular case is to disable the engines. Now, how do you do that? With your cannon, with the one cannon that you have on board. If you saw this on the internet, you saw smoke billowing back across the ship from the firing that was going on at Tuska. Where would they aim? That's a 900, almost 1,000-foot long ship. Where would you aim, to disable the engine? Well, I mean, if you can aim up forward here, you're going to hit a lot of containers, and they all have piggity-wiggities in them, and those will all be destroyed. But it won't matter to anyone. No, you want to disable the engines. Where are they?
In the rear.
Back here. Those are containers piled on top. So the engines are right in here, and you want to hit the ship above the waterline. Above all, you don't want the ship to sink. You want the ship to stay afloat and be capable of carrying its cargo, and eventually probably being towed to a neutral port. So, how are you going to do that? Well, based on this intercept, what the United States did was to warn the crew of the Tuska to get out of the engine room, to move forward, probably into spaces about here. They could go all the way forward, but there's really no point to that. The Navy fired 3 rounds, and they put a hole in the side, according to Donald Trump, It puts a hole inside of the engine room and stop the engines. And I frankly don't know what's happened to the ship since. Somebody would have to take it under tow, and I don't think you would have any difficulty finding a towboat in the Indian Ocean that could take the charge of the Tuska and take her into a neutral port. And what that neutral port is, I don't know. It's a good question for all of us to ask. Let's see. Why do we have blockades? Let me go to the next one, Karen. There you go. Okay.
Is that the one you want to see now?
That's the one. Here's a slide that does the best job I can think of illustrating why we have blockades, how it works. You could think, if you like, of this as this Persian Gulf. All this oil over here has to be shipped through the Persian Gulf to these countries on this side. 20% of all the oil produced in the world flows through the Persian Gulf, through the Strait of Hormuz. And I'll give you a chart very shortly, and I'll show you where it is. But look where it comes from and where it goes to. By far, the largest amount comes from Saudi Arabia, from Iraq, the Emirates, and Iran. Now, 20% may not seem like very much, but if you have a factory, let's say in Finland, that is producing automobile parts, and you lose 20% of your energy that operates your factory, you're out of business. And there's something else you should already be aware of. All of the oil that is produced in the world is used. It's consumed immediately. It's not stored. Somebody may have a storage tank for emergencies alongside their installation, whatever it might be. But basically, all that oil is used. And if you take 20% of it out, then somebody around the world is going to feel that very positively. So, only Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates can bypass the strait. Their supplies of oil do not have to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So let's go to the next chart. This is the Strait of Hormuz. Over on this side is the Persian Gulf, where all that oil originates. And it all has to flow through the Strait of Hormuz and out to the rest of the world. Now, there are only three ways to get here. One is through the Suez Canal, one is around the Horn of Africa, and one is from the east, from around India. And the world's shipping sends, on a typical day, 100 ships through the Strait of Hormuz, 100 ships headed in each direction. That's a lot of oil, and we are using all of it. Now, the United States has directed its current blockade to ships acquiring oil from an Iranian port in the Persian Gulf, any one of these ports. And if a ship attempts to pass the blockade, the United States will seize it. And how will that happen? The United States does not have any ships in the Persian Gulf or in the Strait of Hormuz. Does not have any ships here. All of the United States blockading vessels are out here in the Gulf of Oman. And when a ship is attempted to go through, of course the United States will communicate with it, tell it that it's blocking the reversing the blockade and require it to turn around and go back. And so far, all of the ships have done so, except for the Tuska, which is the Iranian ship we saw in the first slide. So, for the time being, at least, all of the ships that are in the Persian Gulf carrying oil from the Iranian ports have turned around and stayed there. If they try to go through, the United States is going to seize them and send them into a neutral port. And obviously the Iranians don't want that because they'll lose the cargo. By the way, don't hesitate to ask any questions along the way, because I don't want to leave anyone uncertain about what we're referring to here. So,
There's a question over there.
okay, question.
Let's get the microphone in, Nancy.
Where do we have the microphone? Cheryl?
On the way.
I just asked, oh, thank you.
Where are the neutral ports today? What are the neutral ports?
Where are the new proposals?
The neutral ports would be anywhere outside the Persian Gulf. They would be in Africa, perhaps in the Gulf of, anywhere in the Indian Ocean, really. You don't want to send it too far away because the tow is expensive, and the United States has to pay for that tow. So we're going to go to the nearest port we can get, probably in Africa.
What might it be? Could you just name what that port might be?
A port in Kenya or Mozambique or Madagascar, any port which indicates that it's willing to consider this seized ship as prized in a blockade and dispose of it. Now, that means the court in that country has to condemn, what they call condemn the cargo. You try to break through a blockade, that's illegal, and the United States now owns the hull and the cargo. So you need a port in a country which recognizes international law and the validity of this blockade. To take it to any other port, you're probably going to lose it. Anybody that's friendly with Iran and doing what Iran wants. So there's another question.
You said at the beginning that all blockades are different. Why do we think anybody's following these rules? That they go here or there? I mean,
All blockades are different, so how do we think that anybody's following these rules?
like taking them to a neutral port or whatever. I don't think we're following the rules.
We don't make any presumptions about whether people are going to recognize this blockade. But the United States is in a position to say to Kenya, for example, if we set the prize in there, hey, we'll bring this prize to you and you'll be able to dispose of it. By the way, we'd like you to give it to us. And you could take part of it. You could charge administrative services. You can have 20% of the value of the cargo. That's a lot of money. So we would determine that in advance. We would not take the ship to any place that was not going to recognize the validity of our blockade and dispose of the ship. Okay, so the United States has about 15 destroyers, so not all on station at the same time. They need to refuel, they need to get new hot dogs and so forth, so they need to find some time off station. But there are 15 ships that are capable of responding to 15 ships or more, really, that may try to force the blockade. And we will try to do that. Let's go back to slide number 1.
Okay.
And I'm going to conjecture that the United States needs counterweights, and they're all candidates. So my first question to you to qualify you as a gunner's mate is, what is this distance? What is the range here between the U.S. ship and the merchant ship? What is that range? We'll have a test on it afterward. Anyway, it's point blank, correct? It's not radar controlled. There's a gunner's mate that is sitting with a telescope in that gun and looking at that merchant ship and aiming at projectile precisely where the engine room is. This is a destroyer. See the square part of the superstructure right there? That's a radar antenna. A great big square radar antenna. And it doesn't rotate, it rotates electronically. In other words, electronically, this group of sensors is activated, and that group, all the way around. And that radar would give that ship detection possibility out to, depending on the circumstances, like 200 miles. Why does it want that? Because it has to protect the aircraft carrier that it's guarding. What use is that capability now? Very little, absolutely none, as a matter of fact. So what you have is a reversion to earlier practice and earlier devices that we have, like a gun that you aim visually at this. So in a sense, history is reversing itself from protecting this aircraft carrier against Soviet ship, Soviet aircraft, Soviet attack in the middle of the Pacific, or Chinese flying in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with this fantastic radar that we have. Instead, we're reverting to iron sights, as the expression goes, and we're using that magnificent capability very little. I would like to emphasize that blockade is a lawful strategy in international law between belligerents, and the objective is to prevent the other side from continuing his economic activity worldwide. And ideally, the economy of the target country will collapse because no other country will be able to trade. Here we have a Trump-designed blockade, which is specifically focused at tankers carrying oil from Iran and anything else that the administration decides it wants to interfere with. And in the case of the Tuska, it's got components for a nuclear system or for a rocket propulsion system, whatever those are. We haven't been told. I'm not sure we'll ever be told what they are, but somebody will have to find out. That's sooner or later. There is one other feature of this encounter that I'd like to point out to you. Before the Navy fired on this merchant ship, they ordered the crew out of the engine room. They told the captain of the ship, send your crew out of the engine room, because we don't want to injure the civilian mariners who probably, by the way, are Filipino or Thai or who knows where they come from. But we don't want to injure them in the process. So before we start firing on that ship, we tell the captain to get his crew out of the engine room. And hopefully he did so. And that's, to my knowledge, that's the first time in this war with Iran that we have done anything overt to avoid civilian casualties. And that's in fact what happened. If I were those guys and I heard that that word was coming out, you wouldn't have to encourage me to leave. I would get up as far forward in that ship as I possibly could. Well, we don't know what's happened with the Tuska, and what we now have is a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by both Iran and the United States. And they're using different devices to do that. In the case of the United States, what we need is information that says the ship has been to an Iranian port and loaded oil, and it's now attempting to run the blockade. That's what the United States needs. For the Iranians, if the ship is underway and headed toward the mouth of the Gulf, toward the Strait of Hormuz itself, I'll go we'll go back to that. As far as the Iranians are concerned, any ship that's moving, they're going to take it under fire. And so far that has prevented those ships from leaving the port, from leaving the Gulf. Those are, that's what's happening to that 20% of oil. It's staying where it was originally located. And there is one other player here that you need to be aware of, and that is the insurance companies. Every ship that carries a cargo and puts to sea has insurance. It has insurance on the cargo, it has insurance on the ship itself, and it may have insurance on the crew. The insurance companies are in a position to say to the owner, we don't want you to run the blockade. We don't want you to take the risk of losing the ship and the cargo, so we want you to stay where you are. And the owner, not surprisingly, is going to do exactly what the insurance company has told him to do. And so we have no idea what is going on right now among the insurance companies, the Iranian government, and the U.S. government. We probably know what Lloyd's of London has done with the insurance on the cargo of the Tuska and every other ship that's in the Persian Gulf. But I can tell you confidently that no insurance company is going to risk its money by running the blockade. Because when that cargo and that ship get to that friendly, neutral port, they're going to be lost to the owner. The owner's not going to have control of them anymore. And the insurance company is going to say, we're not going to compensate you for you having done something as foolish as attempting to run a blockade. So that is sort of a reinforcement that's taking place for all of the ships in the Persian Gulf. Please go ahead.
I'm a little confused about the ship that was captured. If it was captured in the Indian Ocean, it was headed for the Straits of Hormuz as opposed to going through the Straits of Hormuz?
Did it have to go through the straits?
Well, no. Which direction was it going? Because it seems
What
to...
direction was it going?
It was headed away.
Well, if it's headed away, why is there concern about the contents? If it's leaving Iran, that means that it's not taking nuclear materials to Iran.
I don't know the circumstances of the Tuska's loading its cargo. I don't know where they loaded it, but it was in the Persian Gulf. And it went out of the Persian Gulf probably because the Navy looked at it and said, that's not an oil carrier. We don't have to be concerned with that. And they went chugging on across the Indian Ocean, and they got 340 miles away before the Navy decided, aha, there's something on board there that we don't want the Iranians to have control of, and therefore we're going to go seize that ship. Now, when that ship gets through it,
Was that outside of the blockade? So it was outside of the blockade?
no, it was inside the blockade, but the United States, when it gets to its neutral port, the court, acting in international law, the court is going to say, hey, you let that guy get out without trying to prevent him at all. You can't ask us now to turn this ship over to you. That's one point of view. Or they might say, well, we're glad you caught him, and now we'll all divide up the value of this cargo, and everybody will be happy. So why did the United States not stop him? Probably because he's not an oil carrier, he's not a tanker. And we had said that our target is tankers. So they don't carry oil in containers, so we let him go. We thought better of it, and now the case will go to a court, and the court will have to decide what to do with the ship and the cargo. Okay, so if we go back to the first transparency, okay, I'll give you
This one?
I'll give you the answer to the major question. This range from the destroyer to the target. What do you think that is?
3 to 5 miles.
I can only guess. I would say it's 2,000 yards. That's about what it is. And I'll be glad to answer any other questions you may have.
Oh, okay, a lot of questions. Here it comes.
Pass it on to Jeff.
I wonder whether you have some ideas and can tell us what you think is happening on all these stranded ships in terms of the crew and their food and just what's happening to these people.
That is a serious question because these are civilian mariners. They have signed on for a voyage, and that voyage is turning out to be a lot longer than they thought it was going to be. And so they're stuck on board, and I think the ships are being supplied from the shore. Whether they're being supplied from Iran or from any of the other countries in the Persian Gulf, I'm not sure. But things like food and a change of crew, medical attention, removal of people who have diseases that have to be treated, all of those kind of things are being done from the shore, and it's up to the company to provide them.
One of the questions that I had was at the beginning of your talk, you were talking about having the ships stop and turn around and go back. I recall from the ships that were up here in the north of Seattle that had trouble, they couldn't stop within about 5 miles. How do you get them to turn around and go back?
Well, what you do is threaten them. You threaten them with being fired on. And of course, the Iranians can do that from their side, and the US can do it as well. If we don't have a ship in a particular area, that's okay, we'll wait until he gets to some point where it's convenient for us to intercept him and threaten him, and he can ignore us, but we've already demonstrated that we know how to make him stop. So now, it's one thing to fire on a container ship full of piggly-wigglies. It's another thing to fire on a ship with petrochemicals on board. It could be anything from benzene to crude oil. So that's a risky thing to do, and I don't think we will want to try. Because if I miss by just a little bit, and I hit that cargo, goodbye.
I have a question about international law. Because I wonder what the United States stance on international law was when they attacked fishing boats on the coast of Venezuela. kill civilians.
He's talking about international law. It wasn't okay to be attack fishing boats in Venezuela. What is this whole business about international law and our recognition of it?
International law is a branch of the law that is recognized at times whenever it's convenient for the parties to do that. And that's really what it amounts to. If it's convenient for the United States to find a convenient country with a convenient court that will come to the right conclusion, we're happy to have them do that. So the court needs a certain justification for its decision, and so it applies a standard, an international standard. And if you took the ship to call it a Russian port, for example, you probably would not get the same result that you would get from a South American port. So it's a matter of choice, and the United States would make a choice based on its understanding or its belief that international law will be followed. It may not be.
Most of the, in fact, all of the interdiction apparently is taking place in the Gulf of Oman or out further. So the U.S. warships are not at risk of attack by Iranian forces. If they were, suppose that a destroyer were approached by 100 drones, what kind of defense do they have against that kind of attack?
I would say not much. We don't want to put our ships in that situation. So I don't think we get the Persian Gulf chart out of them.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think the United States will ever send one of its ships into the Strait of Hormuz because the range, depends on where you measure it, but let's call it 25 miles to the shore. So the ship has absolutely, well, practically no time to react to an attack from the shore. And we have not figured out, as far as I know, we have not figured out how to defend ourselves against an attack such as you described, which has so many targets that we can't handle all of them. If we have a weapon like that, I'm not aware of it. So we're not going to send our ship into the Strait of Hormuz because the reaction time from the Iranian shoreline is so small that we couldn't cope with it.
My question is, if there's no formal declaration of war and a warship from one country seizes an unarmed commercial ship of another country, how is that different from piracy?
Well, in the first place, it's done by a government, whereas piracy is a personal, individual, no holds barred activity. And the prize, the value of a cargo in piracy is normally held by whoever seizes it, whatever the gang is that gets away with it. In international law, when you take the ship to a court, the court is going to have to follow its understanding of what international law is. And that's probably different in every court in the world, because international law is not so specific. So it's an activity conducted by a government which automatically legitimizes it. At least Trump will claim that it legitimized it.
So container ships, if they're not leaving from Iran, but other places in the Gulf area, are they able to get through the strait? And if the strait is being mined, is that a problem?
I
I believe you said if they're not leaving from Iran, is what you're saying. So was that?
If a ship departed any other port in the Persian Gulf, it would not be subject to the U.S. blockade. And it could make that claim. And it would eventually make that claim in court. So the United States is not going to pursue that. The United States has already told the international shipping community that it is only targeting commercial ships that have left from Iranian ports. So any other port you go leave from, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, you would not be subject to the blockade, at least the American blockade. Now, how the Iranians are going to treat that ship is an open question. I don't have the answer to that.
Okay, you've had the chance to ask a question, so I'll come to you after I hand it to.
He answered mine. He just answered mine.
Oh, okay, okay, then we'll. You want to ask something? Okay.
So this may be kind of a strange question, and I'll preface it that way. Do the laws of war apply if a war has not been declared?
The laws of war apply when war has not been declared, to be still apply.
The question has to do with the fact that we don't have a declaration of war with Iran, and they don't have one against us either, I suppose. The answer is that you assert what you're capable of enforcing. If the United States is the most powerful maritime force in the Persian Gulf area, what we say goes. And a court doesn't have to recognize that, but probably some would not. But the fact that there's not a declaration of war has not prevented this administration from doing any of the other things it has chosen to do. Attacking targets in Iran, attacking ships. So personally, I don't think the Trump administration is going to let that stand in its way. And now, on the other hand, when you get to the court and you say, somebody says to the court, hey, this was all done without a declaration of war, the court could very well say, well, in that case, none of those rules apply. The ship is free to go. That's entirely possible. In fact, it's a way out. It would be a way to avoid having to come to a conclusion.
I thought the subject of today's session here in U-House was going to be how and when and were the straits going to be open to the transmission of oil, 20% of the world's oil. And obviously, that's not been how are we going to get rid of those mines that were blocking the ships? And that's not what we're hearing this morning.
Well, thank you, Charlie. You have brought up an entirely new subject. And that is, how does a nation impose a blockade? Right now, the blockade has been imposed by the United States with the ships that it has in the northern Indian Ocean. And it's enforcing it on a case basis, on an individual basis for each ship. To my knowledge, there are no mines in the Persian Gulf or the Strait of Hormuz. Nobody is going to admit that they put any there. During the Iran-Iraq war, Iran and Iraq took whatever methods they thought they needed to control shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. What those were, I don't know, and I don't know, maybe the intelligence services know where they are, but I doubt it very much. And so far as I know, there have been no reports of mining incidents with regard to merchant ships. But in the Iraq, when the United States went into Kuwait, when Kuwait had been invaded, one of our ships was damaged by a mine. Who put that mine in place? I don't think we know, maybe we do, but in any event, we had a ship damaged and we hauled out very quickly from that area. So there are mines on the bottom or in place, and whether they would affect any merchant ship that tried to go through, I have no idea. Mines can be turned on and off, and they have a variety of triggering mechanisms. So we could go into mines in a great deal of detail, but I'm not prepared to do that right now. But anyway, I don't know if any mines are there.
Bob, I must jump in here. I have a burning question. You and I talked about this, that the captain of the Spruance warned the Tuska and made sure that the crew had opportunity to get away from where they were going to fire. And you said this is the first time this has happened in that war, as far as you know. What level of command do you think that would have come from? You said you don't think the captain would have had the authority, so it had to be somebody. Do you think it came from the Pentagon, the White House?
Anywhere.
He's not gonna be committed.
If I were the commanding officer of that ship and I had to fire on a target like that, I would issue a directive to the captain just like that and told him to move his crew out of that space. But whether anybody else up the chain of command told him what the wording should be and what his objective should be, I don't know. But I do know that I think the interests of all of the Navy people that are involved in this, they have no desire to injure or kill merchant seamen who are manning that ship.
Do all those commanders speak English? And what processes are in place if there are language barriers for things like that?
Well, first of all, the ships have a communication system. All ships in the world, all merchant ships, all Navy ships have a voice radio system that you can call to the other ship, mostly for navigational purposes. Hey, I'm going to come right, you come left, and you get an agreement like that. But it can be used for a whole bunch of other things, and one of them is issuing orders from a naval ship to a merchant ship. And I have no doubt that the language which is used is English. And it's just like the aviation industry, which is entirely an English language process. The same thing goes on the maritime side. And the captain will find somebody in his crew who speaks English, or they'll do whatever else they need to do in order to communicate that. But they have a radio system very available, which is monitored 24 hours a day on the bridge of the ships. So the people who are on watch are listening to that radio system.
I have my own question. If all of the stories are there part of the blockade, who's safeguarding our carrier?
Well, the carrier is not under threat in the first place. There's nobody in the Indian Ocean who's capable of attacking an aircraft carrier or would risk doing that. But even if that were the case, the carrier always has one destroyer with it. And that one destroyer's job is to pick up the aviators who go in the water. It's called a plane guard. And aircraft go into the water for a wide variety of reasons. Accidental, obviously. But when they do, the carrier always has a destroyer behind him who is prepared to go pick that guy up. I've done that, so it's a common practice. There's always one.
You mean it's a common practice for crew members to go into the water from a carrier? Because what, they lose their balance or jump over to go swimming or?
Well, you know, the launching system for the aircraft can fail. It can fail to reach, just get the aircraft at flying speed, and that's certainly possible. Now, this plane guarding system is not something you like because you're steaming behind that carrier and you're picking up seawater to turn it into drinkable water, which has already been through the bilges of that aircraft carrier. So aboard the destroyer, if your coffee has oil in it, you're not terribly surprised.
So Bob?
Hold on,
Kathy, wait until you get the microphone.
Where are the carriers on that map? Are they way down in the Indian
Let's
Ocean?
know where the carriers are. Here.
Don't we have 3 over there?
They are within flying distance of any target in the Middle East. And those,
So in the Indian Ocean or?
so the carriers will be somewhere south of this point. And all they need is enough room to get up to speed and launch their aircraft. Where they are, the Navy hasn't told me. But I know that that's where they have to be.
Somebody else got it first.
Go ahead, Tom.
Assuming that there ever is a truce, how long would it take to re-establish shipping?
I'm sorry, I did.
If there is a truce, how long would it take to establish shipping again? How long would it take?
I would say 12 hours. I mean, you've got to get the crew up, light off the boilers and get the steam up in the ship, just as much as it takes to get the ship ready to move. That's all.
So, modern warfare seems to be dominated by drones. What would you estimate could be the damage to an aircraft carrier of the current vintage by a drone?
Can a drone damage an aircraft carrier?
Not only that, but
Lots of drones.
they're attacking like in hundreds
Yeah.
of clusters. And there's no conceivable anti-aircraft system that actually has been able to deal with that.
Well, once again, this is a subject on which I am not terribly familiar. I think you have to have been on active duty in the Navy now to know what recognition all the services, but the Navy in particular, are giving to what are called mass attacks like that. What methods they have for dealing with them, I don't know that either. I know we have a lot of devices for dealing with incoming, what am I thinking of, projectiles, missiles of various kinds. We can deal with them one at a time, or 2 at a time maybe, but not more than that. So that's the next week's subject, I guess.
Somebody want to try that one next week? Does anyone else have a question?
Well, thank you all for your attention, and I appreciate it.